Most sim racers pick a GT3 car and then spend the entire season fighting it. Not because the car is bad, but because it doesn't match how they naturally drive. I have been building setups through all the updates for these GT3 cars, and every GT3 car has a personality. Some cars are like super good on aerodynamics and others are mid-corner disasters. In this video we're going through every GT3 car in Le Mans Ultimate, breaking down their behavior on different speeds so you can find one that actually fits your driving style. And even if you already have a favorite car, then understanding the others will absolutely help you to race them. In this video we're gonna break down the handling on the low, mid and high speed, setup freedom and beginner rating. I'll also explain which car I think are best for fixed and beginner series. And by the end of this video, you know exactly which GT3 car you should be driving. Starting out with the Aston Martin, the aerodynamic tank. The Aston is one of the best cars when it comes to aero. It feels most planted to Eau Rouge. And throughout the updates of Le Mans Ultimate, it has been very powerful under braking, especially with to get the downshifts right. As it's still a front engine car, it does have this lazy turn-in and this like understeer. Another feature in the slow corner exit and hairpins, it just has a hard time putting the power down and it requires a lot of short shifting. Most of the time, I drive this car with higher TC settings, and then when it rains, I go even higher on them. Think like 5, 7, 9. Another feature is that if you really want to push this car while the trail braking, it can suddenly let go at the mid speed. You need to be quick to respond if you overdo it. And this car just gets harder as you get closer to a higher pace. And that's why I think that it is not always super beginner friendly. So it gets 2 stars because of this traction on the low speed. On the mid speed you can really feel that aerodynamics take over, and then on the high speed and the aerodynamics are absolutely amazing. As for beginner rating, sometimes the rear tire has this slip problem, and as for setup freedom, it means like what directions you can go. So you can go high wing, low wing, and you can do a lot of different tweaks to get these cars act out like in a different way. So you got setup flavor basically. If you wanted to trade off some of these aerodynamics and get more low speed like forgiveness, then we end up with the BMW, which really feels like the default car. It has very predictable behavior on the brakes, in corners and over curbs. Also, when you put the throttle down, it doesn't immediately snap on you, and when you push the car to the limit, it very much warns you before you set into a spin or a slide. And that will make this the best beginner car on the grid. Also on the fixed series, it seems pretty much competitive. There's one problem though with longer races that tends to wear a lot on tires, but again, updates might change that. And this is the main reason I call it the default car, because it can kind of do everything, but it's not like special in any way. It could be really considered to be the most boring car on track, but it is in the fixed series one of the most popular chosen cars, and you get a lot of setup variety. You can tweak this car in a lot of ways, and it's like, again, very forgiving on your inputs. My mom always used to say, if you have nothing nice to say about someone or something, you better say nothing. No, I'm joking. It's like, the Corvette has a special place in my heart, but I get like a hate-love relationship with this one. When you enter a corner while braking, it feels like the car doesn't want to turn in, but then when speed decreases, you all of a sudden get lots of rotation. Too much. Then, when you touch a curb, it unsettles very quickly, like there isn't any rear suspension. And when you enter a fast corner, all of a sudden that pitch death oversteer turns into this immortal lazy understeer. Like it is like completely has the downforce of a Formula 1 car without the cornering ability. And the rear tires get to extreme heats every time, even when you're not cornering. So in a straight line on Le Mans, these rear tires just heat up for no reason. This car is extremely punishing on the throttle as well when you're coming out of hairpins. If you have too much steer lock, you hit the throttle and it just spins. And it doesn't warn you when this is happening. You need to memorize this. That's why I'm giving it 2 stars on the low speed and 3 stars on the mid speed, because if you can manage that rotation, it absolutely wants to turn. You can position it better for the exit, and if you can handle that low speed punishing behavior with the current BOP, it just flies off into acceleration. So it's really powerful like that. Again, 1 star because of this massive understeer under high speed. Sure, there are ways to tweak it out, but also remember the setup freedom. It really forces you to stiff front anti-roll bars, very soft rear suspension, and even though you soften everything up, it still feels like there's nothing there. I'd say this car could use a remodel because it feels broken at times. If you're liking this content this far, could you please hit that like button? That would really help me out. And check the description for skill level setup. So if you lack confidence in this Corvette, for instance, you can pick a level 2 that might be really safe. And then you can progress into higher levels, which makes the car more aggressive and forces you to challenge more precise inputs. Hundreds of people already got one. Let's move on. So if you wanted an easier challenge with a mid-engine car, you could pick the Ferrari, and it's basically the mid-corner king. It's kind of interesting to me that this car feels very similar how it behaved in Assetto Corsa Competizione, but a little bit worse. I rate this car personally the absolute best in the mid-corner speeds, and it's really good on the brakes. But it really suffers on the acceleration. It feels like it just has no power compared to every other car on the grid. It also struggles on the hairpin exits and suffers from poor traction in slow corners. If it was at least strong in slow corners, it could offset that bad acceleration, but it doesn't. Having said that though, it is very direct on the steering and it feels really agile on the initial entry. Another thing is that when you start searching for more lap time, it gets super tricky on corner entry, and when you run more rake, it starts killing you with oversteer and spins on entry. Again, on the low speed, it kind of wants to turn, it's very snappy and tricky on the exit. On the mid-speed handling, it is absolutely thriving. A lot of that you can also find in the high speed, but then again, it doesn't get a lot of stars because again, when you want to go faster, it wants to snap on you. As for beginner rating, these slow corner exits are struggling if you're newer. And for setup freedom, to offset the bad acceleration, you kind of want to try a lower wing settings, but then the pace just disappears out of the car. Now, an objection in this video might be that, hey, what about BOP changes, balance of performance, if they give this car a big boost? It's not all of a sudden gonna be super quick on acceleration. Sure, it might get better, but the nature of these cars stay the same throughout all these updates. That's basically what I'm measuring here. This video will be useful when they change the BOP. If you're someone who's struggling on slow corner exits, then you need to pick the Merc because it is absolutely thriving on the slow corner exit and on the throttle behavior. The setup tends to feel stiff, which can make it sketchy on bumpy surfaces and on curbs, with the rear wanting to step out when you're on the limit. It's stable under braking, and when exiting corners, it's mega strong on the initial acceleration. It almost launches out of the corner. The Merc is overall predictable and forgiving on harsh inputs, but when you start pushing to higher limits, all of that safety you felt before starts to disappear. It has a character that some people just don't like and others will. And I tend to think on the high speed with a certain wing setting, you can definitely get this car to rotate well. On the beginner rating, I think some people are really struggling with this car into the entry oversteer at times when they reaching a certain limit. And for setup freedom again, if you lower the rear wing or you do different setup tweaks, there's really a one way to drive this car fast and predictable. So that's why it's getting 2 stars over here. If you think a BMW is too easy, or you think a Merc doesn't feel right, a good compromise would be the Lexus. Because the Lexus is kinda hard to hate, really. I've been racing this car last season in our own league, and it's just stable on the low speed, on the mid-speed corners. It doesn't really surprise you, and when you increase TC settings a little, then it's just maybe the best all-round car you can pick. It remains a front-engined, understeer biased car with like a heavy front end feeling, and it doesn't really like to be thrown around. So that means when you steer and you want to really swing that car and you want to get a little bit of that old slip angle abuse, then it gives up, the rear gives up basically. So it's a good car to pivot from a BMW, or if you don't like a Merc. And currently it is one of the better cars also in the longer races. So when you're driving a long race, the car behavior just stays the same. Though there's a little bit of an issue under the high-speed cornering, it tends to be still kind of a boat, something that wants to go in a straight line under high speed. So you really need to be position the car right for the exits. Also, what I experienced yesterday on Monza, for instance, on the Ascari corner, you really need to set that car in the right trajectory to make it exit out corners properly. So that's a little bit of the downside. If you really want to use a front engine car, but you do want a rotation, then you need to use the Ford Mustang. Basically the rotation machine. The Ford shows kind of the DNA of how Studio 397 handles their simulation. First they make the Ford the safest and most overpowered beginner car that was basically immune to curbs and had massive top speed, and now it's everything but that. Now it's very loose on the rear and it cannot really absorb any curbs anymore. It is in a way similar to the Corvette in the mid-speed and low-speed corners. Almost like the rear doesn't have any suspension left. In the Ford, it also feels like you're a lot higher in the car, which makes it kind of lose some road connectivity, especially like in VR. Like the few feeling you get. For me, I don't really like this car at the moment, but I can see people being very quick as it feels super light, and if you can manage that rotation, you can push it out of corners very quickly, but I think it also massively struggles on top speed and stop speed tracks at the moment. So on the low speed and the mid speed, it gets these kinds of stars because if you can manage that, then you can exit out corners quickly, but it's also really good on the brakes just for this light feeling it has. Under the high speed handling, it handles well on high speed, yes, but it's very slow on the straights currently. And as for a beginner and setup variety, it gets 1 star. Again, same as the Corvette, it forces you into a certain setup with super stiff front suspension and high wing settings. And also, as for beginners, I don't think they really enjoy this car at the moment. But that's just me, you know. It's like, feel free in a comment like how you think is handling, because we are all different and we all want different things. We enjoy simulation in like a million ways, right? For the fixed series, I think the McLaren is the safest mid-engine car. But there is this very heavy differential feel in the car. When you exit slow corners, the upshifts are super aggressive. So if you go from gear 1 to 2, like it immediately wants to snap if you have too much steer lock. You need to be like short shifting this car a lot of times. And it kind of wants to understeer out of the corners. At higher speed, it behaves better. And I really believe overall this is a great all-rounder. It doesn't do anything super wrong. When you start setting it up for faster pace though, it tends to want to do the same thing as the Ferrari. When you pitch the car, then it can snap on the entry and you lose it in oversteer. I think with setup you can do a lot of tweaks still, so you can really make it feel different. Again, on the low speed sometimes it like feels like really heavy on the rear. But then on the mid speeds things get better. On high speed I also think it's like a great all-rounder car. The top speed got nerfed a little bit lately. It still very much performs good on high speed, like the high speed acceleration and top speed. The Lamborghini, the qualifying hero. Whenever I pivot from other cars and I get into the Lambo, always feels like somehow it's like super heavy. unresponsive to my steering inputs. It has really good brakes, but you really feel that shakiness of the ABS in the wheel. It really feels planted in the mid-speed corners. However, when hitting the gas, it can either understeer or it snaps into oversteer. And it's really hard to control these limits. And when you're pushing for lap times, that weakness really starts to expose itself. Overall, the biggest disadvantage you can have that you're very quick in one lap, but in races you tend to suffer because it carries the most fuel. That makes the car heavy, so the speed difference between race and quali is actually really big. And also currently I don't think the tire wear isn't that great either. Another feature on the high speed, it tends to have this understeer under the high speeds, and when you want to tune that out, then you get a even more trickier car in a way. So as for setup freedom, you can go some directions. You can go stiffer anti-roll bar or softer, add some packers. You can do low wing. And basically, I think the low speed, it's once to really corner, it brakes pretty good, but again, it's not that forgiving. And when you're really pushing for lap time, it gets like exponentially more harder to drive the faster you go. If you want to win a race in the rain, you need to pick the Porsche, the rain weapon basically. When there are long straights, you are in trouble, as it suffers from top speed, and that has been like this despite any update. It's just how this car is. It just struggles on straights. In the slow corners, it is super good, but not in a kill death Porsche way, as this rotation is super good and predictable on the mid speeds and slow speeds. Under the higher speeds, the Porsche tends to understeer a little bit on the throttle, as this rear engine kind of does that. And you're kind of forced to run a max wing setting to keep that rear end entering corners predictably, which again is painful on tracks like Fuji or Imola, where you're kind of stuck with that high wing and high drag and low top speed. Overall, in longer races, these tires keep up very well. Mid and low speed cornering, absolutely great car to drive. I think this is the best modeled Porsche in any simulation. Even though it's a Porsche, I'll definitely still give it 3-star rating, because the amount of on how the car rotates with the proper setup, it can still be predictable on these low and mid speeds. On the high speed, it's a bit like less handling because of that understeer the car tends to have. And if you really want to push this car, then yeah, it can get really tricky. As for setup freedom, not a lot of freedom here, because yeah, we need to run that high wing to keep that stability. So if you're new to GT3, the easiest cars out to start with are the BMW, the Lexus or the McLaren, maybe the Merc. They're predictable, forgiving and much easier to drive consistently. If you want more of a challenge and character, like the Ferrari, Lamborghini, Aston or Porsche start to reward you for more a precise driving style. And if you really enjoy suffering, you can always pick the Ford or the Corvette. Let me know what you think about this video. Again, I want to point out, with BOP changes, when cars get quicker or slower, these characters kind of stay the same, have stayed the same throughout the updates, unless they really remodel the car, and then I will redo this video. If you want to learn how to tweak car setup and get faster with them, then I highly recommend this Porsche video that will explain how setup aggression complements your lap time. The values don't align anymore, but the principles very much still apply. Thanks for watching.